To the Honourable Lynda Tabuya. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Today I start my reply to the 2021-2022 budget by expressing my deepest condolences to the families of those who have passed away to COVID-19. Some who I knew personally, many who were loved dearly, and all who didn't deserve to die. I rise today with a heavy heart knowing that families throughout Fiji are watching this with empty stomachs. I see it almost every day as I distribute rations on the front lines of this pandemic. But I'm also comforted with the knowledge that although we face immense challenges, through God's mighty grace, we shall overcome. Just like our flag bearer, swimmer Taichi Vakasama, whose event is tonight at 10:35 p.m. Fiji time in the 200 meters breaststroke event. And just like our Olympic sevens team. Now, the Great Britain side looked formidable, thrashing Japan and Canada and holding them scoreless in the process. They seemed unbeatable, but each member of the Fiji team had trained for this game all their lives. They all know that when they run onto that field, they represent their families at home, families who are struggling, but who will still climb a mountain to watch them play. Families in search of hope for something to believe in. Thrashing Great Britain 33-7 today put a smile on Fijians all around the world, and we needed that. Thank you, Jerry Tuai and the boys. We no lose, we believe in you. Dei tikoviti. Now, just like in rugby, we win when we work together, when we listen, when we communicate. At a time when we should be listening and communicating with each other, this government has decided to run by itself and take on COVID-19 alone. Now that this government has isolated itself, COVID-19 has tackled them and turned over possession. The government decided it would play individually, led by its know-it-all vice captain, who has now lost control and left us overwhelmed. The fact of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that the suffering, the hunger, the death and despair of our beautiful island nation is because Fiji First has failed the people. The Honourable Prime Minister yesterday proudly proclaimed this budget from the Bainimarama government and Fiji First. He added, and I quote, "The health of our people and the health of our economy have never before been intertwined." Now, at the risk of sounding like Honourable Mbultavu, I will agree with the Honourable Prime Minister. The health of our economy and their plans in this budget is as sickly and ravaged as the health of our people. Fiji First has failed to keep us safe. The blood of 194 COVID deaths is in your hands, Fiji First. You destroyed Fiji. Firstly, when you opened the borders and allowed COVID-19 into our lives. You had a whole year. From the first wave, to your credit, you boasted about being COVID contained and that New Zealand should learn from us. But what were you doing the whole year to prepare for the second deadly wave, which is happening all around the world, causing mass deaths? But what were you preparing here? Why weren't the medical facilities upgraded from our development partners to be COVID ready? Why weren't vaccinations rolled out? Why wasn't money saved up to provide assistance during long lockdowns? Why? Because the government fell asleep at the wheel. The captain fell asleep at the wheel. The government failed to prepare. You failed to prepare, you prepare to fail. You destroyed Fiji when your incompetent system allowed an infected soldier to interact with a maid. Now, you'd think that after over 20,000 cases and all the pain and suffering that the people of Fiji have had to go through, that we'd finally have learned our lesson and kept our borders secure. This is after being assured time and time again by Dr. Fong and the Honourable Prime Minister that mistakes of the past will never be repeated. But just 4 days ago, Mr. Speaker, just 4 days ago, the Fiji Times reported that soldiers were still attempting to fraternize with people in the quarantine zone. The main reason why we are suffering, the main reason why there's so much death and destruction is because the Bainimarama government's failure to keep our borders secure. The Fiji First quarantine protocols have failed and will continue to fail. The solution is simple, Honorable Speaker, we just need to make two changes. Change the protocols, change the government that came up with them. The Bainimarama government is responsible for the death and destruction brought by COVID-19 because it did not listen to the people and to their medical professionals calling out for a lockdown. But instead of listening, they blame. The people called for a lockdown, a measure implemented by New Zealand. We, the people, asked for a lockdown. Vast majority did. Many health experts have said that a 14-day viti-level-wide lockdown in the beginning stages of this crisis would have saved us. I dare take a step further and can only assume, because of my faith in our medical team, that they would have advised the same. Before I go into what I think of this budget, please let me touch on how this budget has been communicated. One of the main aspects of navigating a crisis is communications. The government has obviously missed the most important point of communications, which is defined as an exchange of information. Communication from government to the people has only been one way. The only way the public has been able to communicate is through angry emojis on the Honourable Prime Minister's videos on social media. Does he not see how angry the people are? I honestly hope he reads the Facebook comments on his videos after he reads his speeches. And yes, on TikTok too. On the video of the Prime Minister's budget presentation on the Parliament of Fiji website, the most reactions, over 1,000, were angry emojis. The comments were so bad I can't repeat most of them here. And even Parliament's repeated notice of no abusive remarks kept popping up on the screen. But that's what happens when you don't communicate and listen. And to add insult to injury, and amid all this crisis, the government tries to sneak in legislation that touches Itoke land. What a blunder. At a time when our country is coming together united on this crisis, which doesn't discriminate, they attempt to sneak in this legislation for exactly that purpose, to divide us. Every time we talk about Indigenous issues, the government labels it as racist. Being pro-Itoke rights does not mean being anti-Indo-Fijian or any other community. Let me say that once again, because in all the propaganda of the government, this is often not communicated clearly. Being pro-Itoke rights does not mean being anti-Indo-Fijian or any other race. What we the landowners want is to hold onto our land and develop it in a way that benefits us and the people that use it. For too long, many governments around the world have taken over native land, saying it's for their own benefit. And for too long, Indigenous people are being left landless. Our land is sacred, passed on through generations from the beginning of time. All we are saying is, come talk to us first. Come talk to us first before you do anything to benefit us. Yesterday, the Honourable Prime Minister spent 15 minutes of his 21-minute speech defending the land bill and attacking me. Mr. Speaker, I won't spend as much time because Fiji is out of time as far as COVID is concerned, which should be our main focus. But I'd like to start talking about Bill number 17 by explaining why this Fiji First budget failed by trying to sneak in this bill. We can go back and forth with legal opinions until they find a cure for COVID. I, like the Attorney General, can also present the legal opinions of my esteemed colleagues such as Philemon Ivosorongo, questioning who monitors the full value of the land and thus correct rent going to landowners, or that of Richard Naidu, who aptly describes the Bill 17 as disrespectful and arrogant, especially in regards to the sensitive areas of Itoke land. The Attorney General wrote a almost 2,500-word explanation of his defense of Bill 17 in his Facebook page. I've also seen with much amusement how TLTB released the same press statement, word for word, as that on the government websites. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter. What matters is asking the landowners first through consultation. What does consultation of landowners look like? It looks like this. Yeah? It looks like the number of petitions that have been filed before Parliament that contains tens of thousands of signatures petitioning the government to remove Bill number 17. The coalition of NGOs and the Methodist Church of Fiji have supported this call. That's what it looks like, Honorable Speaker, because when the land has eyes, it looks back at you, baring its teeth. I'm proud to stand here with the thousands of landowners across Fiji, from the Naturanga, na Momo Lebu na Tuinandi, and the Momo Lebu na Tuinawaka, the Mbosini Momo of the province of Mba, Lulunyabu Sakalambu, Ratupaula Rawiriwiri, and all the signatories, both Itoke and non-Itoke, people of all races who have signed the petitions totaling almost 30,000 signatures because they agree with the need to show respect and consult. Please, Honorable Prime Minister, do the right thing. Withdraw the bill and take it back for consultations. I ask you this, as a freehold landowner, and you have a tenant sitting on your land, would you let your tenant go and mortgage your land without your consent? Absolutely not. You as a landowner need to give consent before that mortgage is issued. It's not an administrative issue. It's a legal fundamental right. We may even end back here in Parliament where you likely achieve the same result, but it would have been a properly consulted bill, a people's bill. This is the voice of the people standing with me in Parliament. These are the landowners here to tell you, ask landowners first. Nothing about us without us. The stakes are high, Honorable Speaker, in finding solutions, and I honestly do not see them in this budget. This election budget is big on the small promises of help. Mr. Speaker, in assessing the implications of the 2021-2022 budget, just as I won't pretend to be a doctor trying to cure COVID, nor will I pretend to be an economist trying to solve the country's economic problems, so I turned to former Reserve Bank Governor Savanutha Narumbe for his assistance, and we've discussed some interesting findings I'd like to share here in Parliament. Now, the other side loves to call us bush lawyers and discredit all opposition. To you, Honourable Prime Minister, I'm not a bush lawyer. I'm actually a lawyer. But as Governor of the Reserve Bank, he was at the helm of cleaning up Fiji's economy after the mess Honourable Prime Minister left in 2006. So I can say with absolute confidence that Mr. Narumbe actually knows the definition of GDP. I'd like to give him credit for his input on my presentation. Now, the Prime Minister keeps laughing off the suggestion that printing money is a real option. An option used by many countries all over the world, especially during difficult times like war, recessions, and now more recently, this COVID-19 pandemic. He nor his trusted bush economist understand the concept of how it works, otherwise they might actually be using it as an effective tool to get our economy back on its feet. Like so many other nations, including the USA, the UK, Australia and New Zealand have done and continue to do through these unprecedented times. The idea is not new, and I'm not the first one to suggest it. Mr. Narumbe mid-last year suggested we should print and inject money into the economy, $500 million, and while this might sound outrageous to the layperson, the concept is simple, legal, and has been used effectively for decades. It is more formally known as monetization and is a form of quantitative easing. It occurs when a government finances itself by selling bonds to the Reserve Bank in exchange for cash. The result is the creation of money at no direct cost to the government, which they can then use to pay for its fiscal programs. Countries around the world use this approach to fund large COVID-19 economic stimulus packages. With this money, cash was quickly distributed to micro, small, and medium-sized businesses, encouraging them to keep their doors open and people employed. Cash was quickly put into people's bank accounts and digital money accounts like M-Pesa, especially low-income earners and those who lost their jobs as a result of COVID-19. And now, while the government has previously suggested that printing money would increase inflation and affect our foreign reserves, it has failed to understand or at least explain to our people that whether you print money from RBF or the government borrows money from overseas, which they're doing, both could have similar effects since they both involve increasing the money supply. Furthermore, by next year, with the economy having declined for 3 years in a row by cumulative 25%, the Reserve Bank should be more concerned about deflation rather than inflation, a real risk with demand crashing. Left unchecked and not well managed, there are potential risks of hyperinflation, Zimbabwe being a classic example. Monetization only works if there is a respected and responsible central bank, ready to turn off the taps when inflation threatens to exceed its targets. It also requires, more importantly, a responsible government with effective financial leadership that will allow the Reserve Bank to operate independently and without interference. Well, in hindsight, Mr. Speaker, perhaps it is a blessing in disguise that this government had been in power too long, has become complacent, and no longer creative or inventive enough to have used monetization as a way to solve our economic challenges. Otherwise, we might have indeed followed Zimbabwe's example. Keeping Fiji First's hands out of the till is now best left to the next responsible government when we are in government next year. More responsible than Fiji First. Having said that, we will form government next year, and it will be a priority to pay back FNPF monies, Honourable Speaker, used by our people during this crisis.
Order.
Now, to conclude, Honourable Speaker, I do not support this budget because it has failed to show decisive leadership that can steer us out from this pandemic. Just yesterday, the Honourable Prime Minister proudly proclaimed that he will enforce cost-cutting measures throughout his portfolios of the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Itoke Affairs and the sugar industry. And the only example he gave was to take out the cutting of cakes from events. Are you serious, Mr. Prime Minister? For someone that wants his cake and actually eats it too? It's pretty mind-blowing. Instead of cutting millions of dollars from his salaries, instead of cutting millions of wasted tax dollars from his government's lavish lifestyle, he wants to sacrifice by cutting cake from events. That's not sacrifice. Let me tell you, sir, what's sacrifice. Give 100% of your parliamentary salary to the poor, Honourable Prime Minister. That's what I've done. I've given back all my salary to feed the families in need and others devastated by this pandemic. To help expectant and new mothers. It doesn't matter what you have, Honourable Akbar. It doesn't matter what you have. It shows your sacrifice from what you receive as a member of parliament in this house. In this house. So spend your money to help expectant and new mothers, to have access to baby clothes and baby milk and bottles and diapers. Reach out to the children in need who don't have laptops and tablets in rural areas instead of trying to tout this online learning that is not even working. Honourable Prime Minister, you have failed. Your government has failed. It's time to go. Honourable Speaker, as you speak, I have been...
Order.
Honourable Speaker, I have been summoned by CID after this to continue with the interrogation, but I just want to say to this government, do your worst. My answer and the answer of thousands and thousands of Fijians behind me remain the same. We say no to Bill number 17. We say no to this 2021-2022 budget, and come elections next year, we will say no to Fiji First. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.